Hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining, and welcome to today's webinar on surveying private LTE and 5G networks, where we'll be exploring the use cases across industrial and logistical environments. We're hosting the session with our special guest from Active Expert, a system integrator from the United States based in Texas. They do a lot of private networks and Wi-Fi projects of any scale. It can be from stadiums to smaller industrial projects. So definitely look them up. They do really cool things, and I'll let George, cover a little bit more afterwards. But big thanks belongs to them for joining us for this session. So let me just quickly introduce myself and our speakers. I'm Daniel Stefanick. I'm the product marketing manager at iBwave, and I would also like to welcome our guest speaker, George Stefanick from Active Expert. Welcome, George, and thanks very much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And also, of course, our speaker from iBwave, Robin Mitchell, who is our sales engineering manager. Welcome, Robin, as well, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, Daniel.
All right, so just before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. So, Robin, if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So this session is being recorded, and you'll receive the recording in your email within the next few days. And I would also like to encourage you to ask your questions, and you can do so by using the side panel of GoToWebinar, and we'll ask them at the end in the Q&A session. And if there are some questions that we are not able to answer today, we'll just get back to you by email afterwards. And if you have any follow-up questions, would like to request a private demo or pricing, please contact sales@iBwave.com, and we'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. So that's all from me for now, and I'm going to hand it over to Robin. Enjoy.
Thanks, Daniel. As outdoor and indoor wireless networks evolve, having the right tools to gain awareness of how these environments affect each other will determine the level of accuracy of the design on both networks. Not only being able to capture the existing network KPIs, but being able to capture the physical elements of situational RF impacts like the outdoor terrain and clutter versus the indoor material types, structural design, and various aesthetic concerns will determine how to address the required RF coverage. Knowing what and where the current network equipment is located is critical in how the next phase of the development and expansion is implemented. So when you look at the life cycle of that project, the need to have various tools work together in harmony as information is shared and developed throughout the life cycle of the project brings opportunity for efficiency and requires reproducible processes for consistency, from creating new projects, building the model venue, collecting that survey data, including annotations for as-built, equipment layouts, and the like, and then developing the design for that venue, deploying that design and making sure it is optimized to meet the required RF coverage for that venue, validating that with an additional site walk, and then ongoing maintenance for that venue. Being able to have those tools work together in harmony are critical properties for a successful deployment for that venue. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on with iBwave is our suite of solutions that provides comprehensive collection of these tools to address your complex wireless technology needs for data collection, design, deployment, and maintenance. Whether it's specifically for in-building with our design enterprise from 3G all the way to IoT and public safety and everything in between. Whether it's a campus design for outdoor and indoor considerations and how both networks impact each other. And then what we'll be addressing today is private networks and how to properly survey that private network with simplicity. And of course, we also have a public safety solution and fiber design solution, but being able to utilize all these solutions in harmony with our iBwave Unity collaboration tool allows you to be able to see end-to-end and track those projects throughout the life cycle. Today, I'd like to take this opportunity to give our esteemed guest, George Stefanick, he's going to share how his team, Active Experts, are utilizing mobile survey and the Prism scanner to survey wireless private networks. At this time, George, podium is yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Robin. And Robin, I appreciate the opportunity to tag team this with you. Thank you. So I'm George Stefanick. I'm with Active Expert. We are located in Waco, Texas. We have engineers all across the country. We've been in mobility services for the last 10 years. I've been in wireless for the last 20. In the last couple years, we've launched this migration of private LTE and 5G. And it's interesting because the technology is advanced to where it is actually enterprise grade. It's no longer carrier grade, if you will. And we were looking for solutions to facilitate data collection, design, that whole life cycle that Robin just went through, specific to private LTE. And I think it's important we kind of level set, because I know there's a lot of cellular professionals on here, but there may be some folks that aren't sure what private LTE is. AKA band 48, CBRS, citizen band. It's LTE technology brought in on a frequency that is coordinated, that is used for enterprise. And today, what I want to share with you guys is how we're using it in a number of different verticals, everything from logistics, healthcare, in plants, chemical, oil plants, etc., as well as mining. So I want to share some of our use cases and what we're seeing in the market and how we're using it. So let's go through and let's hit the first one. Today in mining, it's really interesting. Wi-Fi has been the prominent carrier, if you will, for mining customers. But what has happened in the last year or two is that the private LTE, CBRS, has really taken hold for a number of factors. One is infrastructure costs. You're able to extend the coverage out much further than Wi-Fi while still retaining a tremendous amount of reliability and latency. And why that's important is because in mining, as you might imagine, you have customers that are digging holes in the ground, and those holes are moving. And when those holes move, the infrastructure needs to move with it. And whereby if you have Wi-Fi, you're doing more consistent moves all the time because Wi-Fi isn't traveling as far. Whereby LTE provides that extended coverage, so you don't have to constantly move the mine, the infrastructure with the mine like you would have to with Wi-Fi. Now, the other interesting part is the cost savings of infrastructure, where you might have to have multiple access points covering a mine. In many cases, you might only need 1 or 2 CBRS radios to do that. And those use cases in mining, they're both not only just video and data, but you're seeing video on cranes and on shovels for a variety of reasons. We're also seeing automation in mining, autonomous trucks, remote control vehicles. A lot of those things are today on Wi-Fi and progressing over to a reliable CBRS channel. And of course, you're going to see the common theme across all these verticals, IoT. We're seeing IoT in all levels, from temperature sensors to vibration monitors, thermal monitors, things of that nature, air quality sensors. All that data is being aggregated in those IoT. And when you start to deploy Wi-Fi in around these areas, it becomes very expensive. Many times it's a lot less expensive to do a CBRS solution. And of course, equipment analytics. Everything has a computer in it, and vendors are doing a lot of applications to pull that information off. And that's where CBRS really comes into play. And as I share this, I'm going to share some nuggets on how we're using iBwave and the Epic Prism scanner. We need to validate for our mining customers that, one, we have the correct coverage meeting their SLA, their service level agreement, one that provides them confidence that their equipment's going to work. 2, it's going to be reliable. Like Wi-Fi, single propagation is different for different frequencies. So you need to have the correct tools in your tool bag. And one of the tools that we migrated to quickly was the Epic scanner with iBwave for that purpose. It gives us that visibility into that data very, very quickly. And not only just with CBRS, but also with the tier 1 carriers. I'm going to hit the next slide for me there, Robin. I say plants, these could be chemical plants, oil refineries, things of that nature. Very similar, a common theme that you're seeing throughout this. IoT devices are being used, video and voice. But what you're going to find, though, is there are some very unique use cases. Like in mining, certainly as the mine grows, you have to have that infrastructure that follows behind. Well, plants don't typically grow like that, right? But plants are very involved complexes. You have high verticals, you have ponds, you have these distant areas where they might have laydown yards, things of that nature. And those areas have to be covered in a very expansive way. And included in that is that we've seen some very specific use cases where voice and video is being used in plants, where if a technician is having a problem, a lot of times they need to do a video call with a vendor, right? So instead of going back to the office and figuring that out, they could be out on site, do the video call with the vendor, get a quick resolution to a problem. And those calls have to be clean and they have to be reliable. And while that can be done on Wi-Fi, and many plants do have Wi-Fi coverage, but what we're finding is as plants are expanding, they're considering CBRS, that private LTE 5G solution for that means of medium. And again, I can't stress enough, very similar to the mining customers, we need to have that validation. Are we meeting those SLAs? Do we show the coverage that we need? We need to provide that confidence level to those clients. And so as we're expanding or as we're working on these projects, we're not only doing indoor coverage, but we're also doing outdoor coverage, right? We want to see how devices are going to transition from LTE to 5G. And again, the Epic scanner really gives us the confidence on the private side that we have that coverage. And by the way, I'm going to share it real quick. If you haven't seen it, this is the Epic scanner. It's actually fits in the palm of your hand. It's that small. Weighs just a couple ounces. It connects to an Android device. Very rarely have any connection issues with it. It's very solid. So I'm not carrying around anything bulky. This doesn't eat a whole lot of battery life either. We could practically survey all day without any issues. And it's pretty clean device. It's a solid device, by the way, right? There's no air vents or anything of that nature. It's a pretty solid device there. So when we're in mines and plants, those are dirty environments, right? So it's real important to try to have something that's concealed. It's not able to collect that dust. Something else I want to mention is that a lot of chemical plants are going with new systems. One of those is called Polaris. Those solutions are all-inclusive solutions that tie in a lot of different networks and sensors and things of that nature. And a huge investment's being done by a number of these companies to provide that software. So it's just assumed, we're going to have wireless and it's going to work. Well, with the iBwave solution, we validate to make that be the case. You want to hit the next one for us?
George, we actually have a couple of questions while you're talking about mines and plants. The question is, what are the common backhaul solutions used for deploying networks in mining operations?
Usually backhaul, it all depends, right? As the mines start to push out, a lot of times those are wireless backhauls. They could either be on unlicensed or licensed frequencies. Most oftentimes they're going to be licensed frequencies, especially depending upon the distance. So if we have that ability where we have that CBRS solution and it's miles away, we'll have that connected with a most likely a licensed backhaul.
Excellent. We'll go into the next slide for you.
So again, that CBRS, the private LTE, if you're not really familiar with it today, you're certainly going to be familiar with it as you're starting to see this leak into all the other verticals, and warehouses being one of those. There's a ton of automation that are in warehousing today, and it's only growing. And the automation looks like literally robotic skid movers. There are forklifts that are not being driven by humans. We call these lights out warehouses. Today, they're very reliable on Wi-Fi, but you have some customers that are building at large scale, and they don't necessarily want to have to deal with some of the challenges that Wi-Fi might provide. Some of the, if I'm going to take down a rack or bring up a rack, or the co-channel contention that we're all familiar with, the addition of a lot of radios. In many cases, one CBRS radio can remove 4 or 5 or more Wi-Fi radios, but certainly at a cost, right? And then having the ability to have, effectively a clean frequency while being coordinated it's a much cleaner frequency than Wi-Fi. So customers are considering private LTE CBRS, especially if they have automation. And again, the common theme, IoT, there's tons and tons of sensors and analytics that are being driven. And again, I'm beating a dead horse here, but you need to have that client confidence when we're surveying, especially in and out of tall racks. CBRS doesn't go as far as your carrier coverage because we can't punch that much power behind a CBRS radio. However, it does leak through and does get through quite a bit, and we need to see that. And not only can we collect that information with the Epic scanner, but the automatic reporting allows us to effectively, within a few clicks, pull out a report and be able to provide that to the customer. Give them that visual candy. That's like what we call it, the visual candy, to see what metrics we're meeting. So again, mining, logistics, plants, refineries, warehouses, you're going to see CBRS more and more as time goes on, and you need to have those tools to read it and troubleshoot it. Wait, the next slide, Rob. And healthcare. Healthcare is a very passionate. I'm very passionate about healthcare. I spent a lot of time in healthcare personally, both as working for a VAR, and then I was actually a wireless architect for a large healthcare system here in Texas. Healthcare itself, we're starting to see CBRS in a variety of ways. One is neutral host. If you're not familiar with neutral host, within the CBRS umbrella, many of the vendors are providing carrier services. So effectively, as you deploy your CBRS radios throughout your infrastructure, you have the ability to broadcast Verizon, AT&T, or mainly AT&T and T-Mobile today. I understand Verizon is coming on a lot of the vendors soon. But what that allows you to do is not only provide your own in-house private LTE and 5G, but you can also create small cells for your carrier coverage. And it's really easy to set up. Now, this is where it becomes even more mission critical, especially in healthcare. A server can go down, healthcare professionals can fall back to paper. They're still able to provide immediate care to patients. But one of the most critical things is voice. If the voice network goes down, people's lives are on the line, because you don't know who's coming in, you're trying to get in touch with certain specialists and doctors and things of that nature. And what we're starting to see is healthcare systems consider not only just the CBRS portion of it, but the ability to do neutral host. They may not have a DAS today. They might have a DAS, but they have some holes, maybe a basement, something of that nature. So they're able to leverage their capital, not only by deploying a private LTE frequency, but also by providing some additional, tier 1 cell coverage for voice. So hospitals today not only are looking for that strategy, we're working with a hospital today that is looking to take all their voice and video and migrate that and put that on CBRS, keeping Wi-Fi for all the data, whereby providing a dedicated bandwidth to their mission critical voice and video. The other thing that we're starting to see is, especially in healthcare, for example, if there is a catastrophe, right, and you have a large inflow of patients, many hospitals have a plan to where they could take their parking lots or parking garages and turn them into triage areas. And today, a lot of those systems have what we like to call Wi-Fi kits. They might have some Wi-Fi outdoor coverage today, and they're able to expand other radios even further out in a mesh to extend that coverage. Well, today, again, CBRS provides us that coverage within 1 or 2 radios, whereby instead of having, let's say 5, 6, 7, or 8, they're up today, they're running, and they're ready there to be used. And again, when it's mission critical like this, you need to have those tools to be able to validate that coverage, especially something from related in healthcare, because lives are on the line at that point. And that's not only going to not just propagate voice and video, but it's also going to have the ability to facilitate additional voice coverage. So we actually watch a lot of customers now coming to us asking for us for other alternatives for solutions. And CBRS is one of those. It's not going to replace Wi-Fi. So if you guys are Wi-Fi guys on the call today, you're thinking, oh man, Wi-Fi is going away. It's not. This is Private LTE, CBRS, Citizen Band. This is an augmentation. It's just another tool in the box for solutions. And again, part of that is having that ability to read what those carriers are doing and whatnot, and map that coverage. Next slide there. So one of the things that we used to do before we had the Epic scanner, and this is really interesting, and some of you have probably been there. If I could see all your faces and I asked to raise your hands if anybody's had any homebrew solutions or GNet, or they use the devices for each carrier, I'm sure a lot of hands would go up. Mine would have gone up before I had the Epic scanner myself. So, we would get questions, hey, one use case was recently, we want a backup solution. We're in some rural areas. If we lose our data connection, we're looking to see what carrier would be best be service for us. So we could do something like a cradle point integration for a backup service. Well, years ago, you'd have to go out there with a lot of different devices and try to figure out what's going on and start pulling in a lot of information. Well, Epic Scanner does that for us today. We were extremely impressed with the ability to, especially in very rural areas, to have the Epic Scanner scan the entire frequencies, all the bands, all the channels. And we can actually slice out which ones. If we know what bands are there, we can just scan those bands. But what we like to do is be very thorough. We scan everything. Let's see what's out there. And in this case, we're able to provide what best tier 1 carriers are there. T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, for a backup solution. Before, it was very difficult to do that. Today, with the Epic Scanner, we have the ability to do that. If you ever use some of the, what I like to call, maybe homegrown, some of the solutions that are app related, they can be kind of cumbersome. You have to pull down the data. You have to integrate into Google Maps in some cases. A lot of moving parts. A lot of things can go wrong. And it takes extra time to do that. With the iBwave solution, it negates a lot of that. Everything's all contained in the software in one solution. Also, the reporting is nice. A lot of times when you're doing these homegrown solutions or these other apps, they don't really have great reporting, or it's not easy to look at reporting. Let's put it that way. And especially when you have multiple steps in collecting the data, putting it together, and sometimes you miss data in doing that. Whereas the Epic solution for us, it's all one piece. Once we got our hands on the demo, we knew that was where we needed to go for our solutions. So, Rob, you want the next slide?
There we go. Sorry about that.
No, quite all right. You know, if you haven't seen by now, I mean, how we're using it across all the different verticals, it's our go-to product. You know, I know I sound like a cheerleader, but we're pretty excited about it. And I know Robin's going to be sharing 2 new features that are coming, something that we've been asking for some time. So I'll let him break that out here in a few minutes. But when we got our hands on the iBwave solution, the mobile survey, it was the solution that put all those different components together for us. And it has allowed us to be much more efficient, much more detailed, and especially on the scanner part. And again, I mentioned it a few times, but we're excited about the scanner. We're able to catch everything. So, you know, if it's private LTE, if it's cellular, if it's a very rural cellular carrier, you know, we're able to see the channels and see the bands. It makes it really, really easy for us to do that. And also the other important thing is as we do predictive surveys, and if anybody isn't familiar with what a predictive survey is, it's where we take in this case, let's say a building, we model that building, whereby we understand where we need to place radios based on software. So as we start to move the radios around in the software, we're able to determine where's the most optimal placement of those radios. Well, in software, you're only so good in software, right? There's a lot of variables. If you misscale the project, you know, you can have different results. It could be better or it could be worse. You always want to validate that survey. That's where you have the confidence level. And that's where the iBwave tool comes in. You do your modeling, and then, you know, that whole life cycle that Robin talked about earlier on. But then when you come to the validation piece, right? Validation, not only looking at what the coverage is, but then going with devices to support, to make sure you're getting the throughput, the quality, and the related metrics that you need. So, you know, we're using the iBwave tool to identify what channels we're seeing, what channels, if the customer is looking for a backup solution for cellular, what they might recommend. If they want a DAS assessment, they might hear, you know, rumors down the hall that they're having problems on this floor in that area. Well, we're able to see that with our tools, make recommendations. And then certainly when it comes to the CBRS standpoint, that private LTE, today we have a tool that we're able, it's our go-to tool, and it gives us confidence that we're able to pull in the metrics, review those metrics, and then certainly look over the heat maps and the coverage. So that's our go-to too. And I'd tell you, we have a ton of tools in our bag. The solution itself comes in a nice little Pelican case. That's the size of it. It's my hand. It's not very big. Here's the inside of it. You have 2 different antennas, 2 different omnis, different gains. Nice cushion pack to keep your investment safe. It's light to carry. Go through TSA. Never get a second glance at it. Unlike some other tools that we have, people get inquisitive. What is this? You know, what do you use it for? Never have a problem on the TSA side of things with it. But overall, we're pretty happy with it. It is our go-to tool for private LTE and the major carriers for the assessments that we do. So, you know, here's some benefits that you're going to see. Obviously, the ease of use. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to show this in a demo in the emulator. When you plug the scanner in, it's quickly identified. I know some tools, when you plug them in, it might take, you know, minutes, up to a minute sometimes. Never had any reliability issues. You plug it in, a second later, it pops up. You're going to notice those images off to the right there. It could be used in a handheld device or a tablet. My engineers like to use the tablet. It gives us more real estate to visually look at the data. We have used it with mobile devices in areas where we're not necessarily, you know, we're doing the stop and go data. Sometimes that's really good to do that on the mobile device if you don't have the ability to get a tablet. And the KPIs, we're looking at all the big metrics there. So it pulls all that rich data in. We're able to analyze that data. And here's the other cool part of this is that you're able to compare and contrast across carriers. You know, how well is AT&T compared to T-Mobile or Verizon in a specific building? And why that's so important is that, you know, you might have a customer saying, hey, you know, I want to add some repeaters. You know, what carrier is going to be the best to do repeating in? As I mentioned before, it provides confidence. You know, when we pull in all those metrics, the scanning ability is off the charts for us. Again, I mentioned it a few times. I know Robin and Daniel are probably tired of me hearing it, but the scanning capabilities we're really impressed with. And like I mentioned before, it's small, it's compact, it's easy to use. I think we're up to the demo, right?
Yeah, before we get to the demo, we've got so many questions coming in. I want to try to tackle some of these questions as we dive into the demo.
Sure.
Let's see. So this is a question for you, George. Let's see if I can get back to it. I've been trying to scan through these. So it says, is it necessary to establish any relationships with the mobile carriers for their private network deployments?
No, not necessarily. So CBRS itself, it is citizen band. So you have a band of frequency that you're using LTE protocol, LTE and 5G protocols on. It is coordinated. So there is AFC that's involved, but not necessarily with the carriers themselves. There are carriers that do have PAL licenses in these areas that, of course, you might have to lease that PAL if a carrier has that. But you know, it's generally speaking, no.
All right. Next question. Heard you say that the scanner allows P25, but has this been approved by the HJs, and does it qualify per standards? Oh, excellent question. So yes, we've actually had multiple HJs in different jurisdictions that have evaluated the scanner, and it does meet the TIA standards for P25 analysis. So great question. As a matter of fact, we've had some independent studies done to validate the accuracy of our solution. Another question in line with that is, does the scanner require, I just lost it. Does the scanner require a phone solution for throughput testing? So two things here with that consideration. When you connect to the scanner, it does connect via USB-C connection. So it does take over the device's radio communication. So you will utilize the scanner for, and we'll kind of get into that, whether you're using it for a spectrum analyzer, or blind scan, or capturing the recorded or the required channels for your survey. But for throughput testing, that you can do based on our survey, mobile survey solution with the device's capabilities. So whether that tablet or smartphone that you're using to collect the data, you can use that to capture the, to validate the throughput, but not via the scanner. So that's two different radio specifications to do that. All right, I hope I didn't muddle that too much. All right, next question is,
and Robin, real quick. Robin,
sure.
real quick, and I think it's real important. Yes, this is USB-C. You can see that there. And then we have the antenna connector on the other side. So it is powered via USB-C.
All right.
Yeah, there's a great image there on the bottom right.
Oh, here's a good question. Does the scanner allow to export CSV and import into iBwave to a RSSI reference for design? Excellent question. So utilizing our survey software, you're actually able to upload and that project that's collected in the field with the desktop design software, and there's no need for any post-processing of the data. So you're able to analyze the different KPIs associated with that project. I think that's, you address that in one of your slides there. Here's another good one about the scanner. Does the scanner require activation via a dongle? So there's no dongle required to work the scanner with the survey solution. So as George talked about, it's just simple USB-C connection between the two devices, the scanner and the Android device. All right. Oh, here's a good one for you, George. Any use cases for transit systems, specifically using it for train signaling system?
You know, that's a great question. We haven't been involved in any one of those solutions, but while we are not a lead of a project, we are working with an airport, and we're focusing on a different technology, Wi-Fi. And part of the airport project is CBRS. Not necessarily related to transit, but on the plane side of things, they are being used there for a variety of different use cases. But here's some things with CBRS, and because that's more of a CBRS question. When you deal with CBRS, you have to obviously install SIMs or do a eSIM. You know, there is manhandling of some of the devices. So these are going to be devices that are let's say corporate or enterprise owned and distributed to employees, workers, etc. Also, we're seeing where like you have the ability to do different types of solutions, whether it be a Meraki or a Cradle Point, where you're putting an eSIM or a SIM in these devices, and whereby then extending the network, providing Wi-Fi as the last mile, if you will, and then the backhaul be over the CBRS. And we're seeing that in a lot of different places. For example, on trucks. You know, you might have a work truck and it's pulling analytics. It happens to, you know, also be providing coverage into some remote areas. You know, cameras off cranes, cameras off conveyors, with again using either a Cradle Point or Meraki as we'll call it a jump box, if you will. So a lot of these factors can be translated over to transit systems. The nice thing with CBRS is the ability to negate a lot of extra roaming, right? So if you are doing a large transit system where you have to constantly do fast roaming, if you're doing, depending on the use case, right, you can negate a lot of that because your coverage area is going to be a lot greater.
Excellent. Another question for you, George. Throughput. What throughput? Let me make sure I'm saying this per their request. What throughput capacity is expected for private LTE?
Well, you have LTE versus 5G. 5G, obviously, you know, the next generation we're living in today is going to be a lot quicker. You have higher qualms, etc. It all depends on how it's configured. In many cases, LTE, generally in of itself, is going to be very similar to Wi-Fi, but just at greater distances. That's how I like to explain that to customers. But one of the big factors is just not the throughput itself, but it's the latency. When you talk about CBRS and you compare it to a relatable, you know, either be Wi-Fi or cellular, effectively this is kind of that solution in the middle. But you're going to see very similar connections and throughputs than you would with Wi-Fi that you would with CBRS, but at greater distances.
Okay, let's see, we have quite a few questions here. Oh, here's a good one. What is the frequency range of the scanner? I can take that one. So the scanner is capable of 70 megahertz up to 6 gigahertz. So when you're using the spectrum analyzer, you're actually able to do interference hunting for that range from 70 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. But of course, for LTE, 4G, 5G, and P25 specific channels are what will be captured during your survey data collection. All right, I think, man, we got so many questions. I do want to get to the demo, do a little bit of the demo, and we may have to take some of these questions offline, but we'll try to get as far as we can. Let's see here. All right, so I've actually started doing a couple of things here, but we'll just start with the scanner. Let's go here, and so what you're seeing here is the scanner's blind scan mode. I've actually done a blind scan. It took about 5 minutes to do a blind scan to capture LTE, as well as 21 channels LTE and 1 5G new radio channel. As you can see, the KPIs available based on that. You see the carrier, the channel, the band, the frequency, the other KPIs associated with that particular channel, as well as on LTE. You can see the various carriers and channels that have been selected. So to George's point, when you go on site to do your site survey, it's best to do a blind scan prior to beginning your survey so you can see what's being what's available at that venue, so you can get specific on the data being captured. And as I also mentioned, go ahead, George.
Yeah, and again, if you can go back to that scan.
Sure.
This is where I think we get excited, right? From a wireless perspective, because you could things you can't see, right? This tool is going out, it's doing a blind scan, and Robin mentioned, the scan took about 4 to 5 minutes. Well, if you know what bands and channels, you can actually limit that scan to a much lower interval if you just want to scan certain bands. But doing that blind scan, you're going to catch it all. You're going to catch CBRS. You're going to catch T-Mobile. You're going to catch Verizon. You're going to catch AT&T. You're going to catch those rural cellular carriers. It's going to scan it all. Not only that, but the KPI information there is critical to what we need to understand. So, just right here where Robin did the scan, you can see the T-Mobile. I think there was a Verizon in there and AT&T. So, when we're looking at, a repeater solution, or if we're looking at a DAS solution, things of that nature, we're able to really collect that rich information relatively quickly. And one of the features, and Robin, I want to make sure you mention it, today it's a manual process. Once you do that scan, you have to enter those channels into the software. In the very near future, Robin, right? This is going to be automated?
Yeah, it is on our roadmap to be able to bring in those channels that are on the blind scan that have been identified and bring those over into the survey solution. So we're excited about that. So you don't actually have to record these manually and then enter them in manually in the survey.
Yeah, excellent.
All right. So I've actually started data collection here, and in this particular venue, you can see this is a warehouse. We've got some outdoor container yard. We've got a warehouse with conveyor belts and shelving and the like. And we're actually doing this live. So, that's always dangerous, George, to do things live.
Know, yeah.
But you can see I'm actually capturing data through the venue, those channels that I mentioned earlier during the blind scan. I've entered those in to kind of give us an idea of walking through the venue and capturing that data. And as you can see, the waypoints are mapping out through the venue. And even though this is a live demo, obviously I wouldn't be walking this fast. The scale on this venue is pretty large. So let's just do a quick, let's just say done. Yes, let's save it. And so you can get an idea of the data that was captured. Oh, okay, I know. Let me go.
Yeah, while Robin works on that, I'd like to share a few things when we're doing our surveys. You have the ability to do a stop and go as well as a continuous. And there could be some very specific use cases, why you might use one over the other. But it gives you that flexibility for stop and goes as well as continuous. And the scanner is going to tell you if it has the right information. If it's scanned all the channels, it'll go green Once it goes green, you know you're getting that rich data that you need.
So one of the great things about, we talked about earlier, using the survey solution, you don't have to post-process the data. So right in the field, you'll know what's captured and the signal strength associated with it. And of course, you can see here the KPIs based on the legend, and you can select individual points in the data to show what was collected, not only the KPIs for the channel, but any neighbors that were associated with that. You saw that with the 5G channel as well. So let's go back to.
Yeah, and one thing I want to make sure that's not missed is that as you're doing this assessment, let's say it's a warehouse in this case, you might spend an hour or two. You don't have to do a walk for each carrier. You do one single walk, it's going to collect all that carrier information. So once you have all that data, you can compare, you know, what does your AT&T look like to a T-Mobile, to a Verizon, or even your private LTE, right? Your CBRS. You can collect all that in one walk. You don't have to do one walk for each carrier, if you will. You know, so you have that ability to collect that rich information and to be able to provide that visual to a customer.
Now, one of the questions that came in during our presentation was the fact that we can use mobile survey with third-party data collection tools. And traditionally, you select this share icon to connect with those third-party data collection tools. We did an update to our IWC file format 20.5, and we've requested that those third-party data collection tools update their solutions to be able to read that new updated IWC file format. But if they have not, we still give you a way to create that IWC. You can save that IWC file to the device and still share that with that other third-party data collection tool. So regardless of what you would normally do, normally you would actually select the share icon to do that. And then it would launch whatever their solution interface is. And then the floor plans would be shared with that device. You would collect the data on that device. And then once you're done collecting the data, you would save it back to that IWC file format, or the iBwave. Depending on which solution you're using, says share back to iBwave. And then when you open that floor plan, the data that was collected with that third-party data collection tool will then show up on the floor plan. And then, of course, you can upload the project to the cloud and share that project with the key stakeholders, whether you're sharing it with the system integrator that needs to bid on the project, or you're sharing it back with the actual design engineer who's going to integrate that survey data with the predictive data to better design that venue. So hopefully that addresses that question that came in about sharing with third-party data collection tools.
And then Robin, since we're on this screen, the PDF that's up there on the toolbar, that's for reporting. Effectively, after you've collected your data, you're able to quickly generate a report that shows all the KPIs that you've detailed in the report. It's real simple, real easy to do, quick to generate.
I'm using an Android emulator, so I don't know if that will allow me to load that PDF. We'll see if it plays nice. But to your point, it does create that report very quickly. And no, I don't have any apps associated with that PDF, so unfortunately I can't show it, but it does create the PDF, and it does give you a way to, if you have that app on the device, you can actually open that PDF viewer there and see that report. Right.
And I guess, Robert, one of the things, the GPS, are we okay to mention that?
Yes, so as you can see, this is a venue that actually has a warehouse, and then there's some outdoor areas, the loading area here. You've got an outdoor area with a container yard here. On our roadmap for later this year is the GPS capability to be able to do GPS capture with the survey data. So as you do your outdoor walk test, you'll be able to see that you won't have to use the waypoints and tap and go to get that data captured outdoors.
Yeah, we're extremely excited about that. You know, so a lot of the stuff that I mentioned, mining, outdoor triage for healthcare, plants especially. When you're doing the outdoor surveys, it becomes a lot of challenges, right? Do we have the latest map, right? Is it Google Earth, or is it going to be maybe a flyover if it's a mine by the mining company? And the mine's always constantly moving. So sometimes it's really difficult to kind of put yourself where you're at in that data collection, because the environment's changed depending on the map that you use. Google Earth could have flew over 2 years ago. Things have changed. Today, you know, we've been asking for this request, and when I got up with Robin's like, hey, it's on the roadmap. We're extremely excited for that. And I really hope we're using the internal GPS. Hope so. We don't have any extra dongles, you know, coming off the devices, but we're excited to have this feature on the roadmap, because it's going to save us even more time, and it's going to give us more time to focus in on data collection, the quality of the data collection. Certainly, especially if we're doing GPS, because if you're outdoor, the wrong click somewhere, you know, potentially could change the outcome of what the metrics look like. So we're excited for the GPS to be on the roadmap, and thank you for that.
Absolutely, we're definitely invested in listening to our customers' feedback and make sure that we are developing a tool that is very helpful in making your job easier. It's RF is hard enough by itself. Yeah. So being able to design and collect that needs to be as simple and easy as possible. We try to remove as much complication as humanly possible, but of course, there's always limitations. Oh, here's a great question for you, and I want to get some of these questions before we close out, because we're getting near the top of the hour. But the question is, oh, I lost it. It was so many. It was in reference to, oh my goodness. Yeah, it was in reference to the private LTE over Wi-Fi and the backhaul over Wi-Fi, if you've actually implemented that. And if so, oh, I lost this. The updates are coming in so quickly, I can't keep up with how many question jumped around, so I've lost the second part of that. Oh. So maybe you can address that. Oh, I see it. I have it now. Yeah, so it says, have you seen or tested a real deployment with private LTE for access and backhaul over Wi-Fi to extend coverage? If so, how was the performance?
Yeah, so great question. So you have to remember, when we talk about private LTE, think of it as a Wi-Fi radio, effectively. You're deploying that Wi-Fi radio, it's going to plug into your network. Again, let me preference, depending on the vendor that you have. And I'm going to give a shout out to Solona. We work closely with Solona. Solona has a great solution. So within not only just Solona, but other solutions that are out there, the private LTE is effectively a radio. It plugs into your network. It's riding your network as a backhaul. So if you were to have your radio and you want to plug it into and backhaul it over Wi-Fi, you can. Just like anything and everything in networking, it's all about latency, right? As long as we have low latency, it's going to work. And we have. We've done demos to where we're providing some solution from a demo perspective. We don't want to trench fiber and everything else. Well, we'll just do a quick Wi-Fi backhaul, extend the network, get CBRS out there. We've done that, and it's worked well for what we're trying to achieve from a demo perspective. Just like anything else, if it's a mission critical network, which most enterprise networks are or corporate networks are, you know, we look at license frequency more open to that than you know, the challenges of Wi-Fi. And you have to remember, this is all coordinated. So, you know, if your neighbor comes and sets up a radio, there's a convergence that will happen potentially that might change channels and power. Unlike Wi-Fi, traditional Wi-Fi, where you kind of manage your own network, which is good or bad, right? You could be competing for channels. But if you're a Wi-Fi engineer today, liken CBRS to Wi-Fi 6E, right? Especially if you're going to be doing external antennas, that has to be coordinated. It's a very similar, if not same process.
And since we have so many questions, we'll probably have to respond to these offline. But you mentioned the comparison between Wi-Fi and private networks. It's probably a good time to talk about training. We published a online class, a virtual class, self-paced class from iBwave for private networks to help you get off the ground running. And as I understand it, CWMP worked with Solona to produce a C5S, or a private networks training solution that was also free. That was last year. So I don't know if that's still available, but any recommendations, George, on training to help the Wi-Fi experts get acclimated to this new private networks world?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a traditional Wi-Fi guy. That's where I started, and that's where I've spent many of my years in. In fact, I'm a big supporter of CWMP. I've worked on a couple of the books that they have there, the CWSP. I was a technical editor, things of that nature. So the Solona, well, first off, the iBwave scanner training was fabulous. It was a step-by-step process. You had to finish one module to get to the next. I thought that was a really good training session. The CWMP with the Solona is a great session. The one that I would also add is to get a CPI. And you can get that from Google or Federated Wireless. Myself and my engineers went through Federated Wireless. The CPI training, it's a couple $100, mind you. It's not cheap, but it's not super expensive. That's really going to get the Wi-Fi engineer off the ground and running. It's going to give you all the fundamentals on the frequencies, how they're used. It's going to talk about coordination. And at the end of that training, you get your CPI certification, which is going to be important because as you start to maneuver radios, CPI, private LTE and 5G radios, you have to assign your CPI number to those moves. So it's a very valid certification. Unlike if you get a CWNA, for example, that's great, you have it, but the CPI actually has value and worth to it. You need that number if you're going to play in this arena. So I would definitely look at the Federated Wireless for the CPI training. We went through that, so I could speak to that. It was a good training.
Outstanding. That's good to know. Definitely helpful for those getting started in the private network space. And as we wrap up in the last couple of minutes, I know we had some questions about demos and about further question, even pricing. So I want to take this opportunity. I don't know if Daniel can chime back in. I know he was having some audio issues earlier. So we want to make sure we share these QR codes so you can sign up for a live demo and further Q&A with the scanner, as well as mobile survey. And of course, if you have questions, and we saw quite a few questions come in about pricing, of course, you can always email us at sales@iBwave.com.
If you can guys hear me, can you guys hear me?
There
well?
you are. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention for the live demo session on June 26th, that's going to be for LTE and 5G with our solution. But if you scan the QR code, there's one more session for July 17th, and that will be for our mobile survey for public safety solution. So that's where you're going to see also the grid test and everything. So these are two separate sessions. So if you're interested in public safety, that's going to be the one for you. Just one thing I wanted to add. That's it for me. And guys, thanks a lot for this excellent presentation. It was great listening to you, and thanks everybody else for all the questions.
All right, Dan, you're fading in and out, so apologize. We're having some technical difficulty with Daniel's audio. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to learn more about private networks, iBwave survey, mobile survey, as well as an Epic scanner, and hearing from our esteemed guest, active expert, George Stefanick. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Take care now.